Let's look at some of AngularJS's directives for submitting a form. We're not going to cover validation and server-side processing right now. We'll do that later in the course. But for now, we at least want to know how to hook into the submit button. The ngSubmit attribute is placed directly on the form tag itself, and it specifies a callback function, usually on your scope object, that'll be called when the user presses the submit button. Now this is going to prevent the default behavior of posting back to your website. If you're writing a single page app, a spa, or a mini spa, then you want to be sure to handle everything with AJAX calls. And ngSubmit is what lets you do that. Likewise, you could place an ng-click attribute on your submit button itself. And you'll also specify a function that goes against your $scope object on your controller. Now if you don't use ngSubmit, you'll need to use ng-click on your submit button. And you should only be specifying one of these attributes. If you use both, your form might get submitted twice. But ng-click also lets you specify a function to go against your $scope on your controller. And you just want to make sure that you attach your callback function directly to your $scope object. Now let's look at an example of using this. So I'm in our project and we're in the app folder. Let's go to eftemplate.html. This is our view which has our form. And I'll add the ngSubmit attribute. So now when the user submits this form, it'll look at the $scope in the controller and look for a function called submitForm. Notice we have the parentheses to make sure it gets called as a function. And we need to add this to our controller now. So I'll go to efcontroller.js, and you can see I added the function right here. We take our scope object and set submitForm to a function. Now we're not going to do any AJAX call or validation right now, but I will set a breakpoint so we can examine our scope object. And I'll run this. And let's just change a few things. I'll make the name Milton Wadhams III, and I'll give the stock options perk and take off the others, and I'll give him a payroll type of W2. I'll hit submit, and if we look at our watch panel here at the bottom, I'll open up the scope and go to employee, and we can see that full name did get set to Milton Wadhams III. The payroll type is W2 now, and the perks are false for the car and 6 weeks, and perk stock is set to true. And the employee object on the scope is all set up and ready to be sent to the server. So I'll cancel out of this now. And let's take this ngSubmit off and we'll add an ng-click to the submit button. Here's the input for the submit button. And we'll call the same function on our scope object. Make sure to specify the parentheses here too. We'll set the name to Milton Wadhams IV and submit. Let's just make sure that went through. And we do have that name now, Milton Wadhams IV. So those are the two attributes which submit the form. And whichever one you use is up to your style, but make sure you only use one of those techniques. Now just to check that, let's go back to our eftemplate.html and we'll keep in the ng-click, and we'll also put back the ngSubmit. And it should get called twice now, one for the at the form level and one also for the submit button, which is what we don't want. I'll hit the submit button and we hit the breakpoint once, and I'll hit continue, and we're back at the breakpoint again for a second time. So just make sure you pick one programming style and stick with it.